The grey sky blankets Greenwood Cemetery like a giant shroud, covering each gravestone and the barren trees that stand shivering in the December wind. There's no snow, but the cold cuts to the bone. It's the cold of the earth, of stone, and of a void that can't quite be named. Daniel Carter stands motionless between two freshly dug graves, his feet sinking slightly into the soft, damp soil. He wears a faded grey wool coat, the kind his foster mother knitted 15 years ago. The collar is frayed, the third button missing. His dark brown hair blows wildly in the wind, and his deep-set eyes are fixed on the two new gravestones, still raw and uncarved. One reads Martha Carter, the gentle foster mother born 1952, died 2025. The other Dean Carter, the silent man with golden hands, born 1949, died 2025. There are no flowers, no photographs, no mourners, only Daniel, the adopted son they took in when he was just 3, silent and withdrawn in an orphanage, never speaking a word. He had sat in his old silver car for nearly an hour before getting out. He thought someone might show up, a friend, a neighbor who had spoken to his mother once, but no one came. The cemetery felt abandoned, as if the world had forgotten the two people who had just left it, leaving no trace behind.
I'm sorry for never asking about my birth mother.
His voice cracks, weak, as if even his words aren't sure whether they deserve to be heard again. He kneels, his hand brushing the freshly turned earth. Cold as ice. A dry blade of grass, stuck at the edge of the grave, is blown over by the wind. He doesn't know how to cry. Or maybe. The tears are gone when one has become too familiar with a pain that never fades, Martha used to say. Real pain is when you can no longer shed a tear. Maybe she was right. The wind carries the smell of damp earth and moss, brushing his thin shoulders. Daniel doesn't move. He recalls the night he got the news, a phone call from the police, an accident on the highway. A truck lost control. 2 victims dead at the scene. No further details. No one was waiting for him at the hospital. No one asked if he needed help. He went to claim the bodies, signed papers, collected the ashes, chose the plot, did everything like a machine, and today he was here burying the people Daniel once called Mum and Dad every day. But now there's only silence, alone in the empty cemetery, with no one left to call. An elderly couple walks past the western graves, pausing briefly to look at him, then quietly moving on. They don't approach, they don't ask anything. Just a hesitant glance that fades like morning mist. Daniel stands up. His pants are wet at the knees. He brushes off the mud, but doesn't care. The wind picks up, rustling the pine needles in the distance. A few black crows caw loudly from the treetops. The air has the unmistakable scent of grief, unspoken but felt.
Do you want me to cover the graves?
No, they lived quietly. Let them rest the same way.
The man nods and walks away, leaving Daniel alone with the growing silence that feels like a chasm beneath his feet. He sits down on a nearby stone bench, his gaze still fixed on the 2 mounds of earth. His fingers absent-mindedly twirl a button old, brass-coloured, like the ones Dean used to wear while gardening. Daniel remembers the last time he spoke to them, 3 days before the accident. His mother asked if he was eating enough, if he was sleeping well. His father just said, yeah, like he always did. They didn't mention anything else, and now he has no one left to tell. Inside him, a void begins to form, not the void of losing loved ones, but the void of things that were never said, questions that were never asked. Daniel remembers when he was 9, asking Martha,
Mom, why don't I look like you?
Because you're special. And being special means you don't have to look like anyone else, my dear.
He used to believe that answer was enough, but as he grew older, when he saw his friends talk about their grandparents, their hometowns, their childhood photos, He realized he had nothing but a fragment of memory that began when he was 3. And what hurts him most is that he never asked to know more. He had been silent for so long, as if afraid that asking would diminish the love of his foster parents. But now, with them gone, he doesn't know who he is anymore.
I know you both loved me, but did my real mother ever love me?
No answer. Only the cold wind cutting through his coat, seeping into his chest, making his heart heavier once again. By midday, Daniel finally leaves the cemetery. He walks past the old graves, many of which belong to people whose names are now forgotten. He wonders someday, will his name be here? In the same silence. On the way back, he stops by a small flower shop near the gate. The young girl behind the counter looks up and smiles softly.
Can I help you with something?
I just want to look.
He glances over the bouquets, white chrysanthemums, lilies, yellow roses. Each one carries an idea of farewell, but he picks nothing. No flower feels right to place on the graves of those who gave him a lifetime. As he turns to leave, the girl calls after him.
I'm sorry for your loss.
Daniel nods, says nothing. Some sorrows don't need words, sometimes a single glance is enough. The car moves slowly down the road, covered in dry leaves. The sun is high, but still hidden behind the clouds. Inside the car, the radio plays soft classical music without words, but it speaks everything that can't be said. He doesn't go home right away. He drives aimlessly through the small market where his mother used to buy bread, past the garage where Dean used to work. It's all still there, but no one's left. When he returns to the house at the end of Willow Creek, Daniel sits in the car for a few minutes. The light blue 2-story house stands like an unforgotten piece of memory. The upstairs window still has the lace curtains. The porch light is still on. But inside, the door will never open again. The house on Willow Creek Street still stands just the way Martha liked it. Everything clean, tidy, and everything in its place. As if, at any moment, if a picture frame tilted by 3 degrees, she would step out of the kitchen to adjust it. But now, in the eerie silence, that order only makes Daniel feel a cold chill down his spine. He takes off his shoes, walking slowly across the old wooden hallway, past the striped rug Dean always grumbled about, saying, "Slipping on this could kill you," and stops in front of the kitchen where 2 breakfast chairs are still placed by the table. One chair is pulled out slightly. Maybe Martha sat there the morning they left the house for the last time. Daniel opens the fridge. There's a little milk left, a slice of apple pie, and a few slices of deli meat. He closes it, not hungry. His stomach feels like it's been hollow for days. He pours a glass of water, standing by the sink, looking out into the backyard where Dean once built a long wooden table to fix bikes for the neighborhood kids. It was also where Daniel first learned to take apart his bike without crying. But all those memories now seem like faint shadows in the mirror of his mind. No more Dean, no more Martha, and no more reason to avoid the question, where do I come from? The attic of the house on Willow Creek was never a place Daniel had wanted to set foot when he was younger. He asked Dean what was up there. Dean only answered briefly, "Just junk." Martha was gentler, saying, "Old stuff, nothing interesting." "Sweetheart," that line repeated for years, like an unspoken rule, a place off limits, like a memory not to be turned over. But today, Daniel stands at the bottom of the wooden stairs leading up to the attic, hand gripping the worn banister, knowing he can't pretend anymore. The house now only has him, no one to forbid him, no one to stop him. And if there's an answer to the question hammering in his head, where do I come from? It's up there. The stairs creak with each step. The attic door groans as it's pushed open. thick dust rising like a thin cloud. Daniel coughs lightly, using his phone's flashlight to peer inside. The smell of damp paper, rotting wood, and old fabric hits him like a gust of time. The space is cramped, stifling, but eerily quiet. He begins to open each box: old books, Dean's photo albums from his younger years, a few Christmas cards never sent, a typewriter with broken keys, and an old wedding dress folded carefully in a plastic bag. All of it tells stories Daniel either knew or thought he knew, until he finds it a small cardboard box wrapped carefully in beige fabric, tied with thin twine, no name, no label. He pauses for a few seconds, then gently pulls the box free from the jammed shelf. Something heavy settles in his chest as he touches it. The box isn't big, about the size of 2 stacked books, but its lid is slightly warped. The paper edges yellowed. He brings it downstairs, sets it on the living room table, sits down, and opens the lid. Inside is a bundle of old papers, wrapped in thin plastic cover. As Daniel pulls them out, a birth certificate slips from the edge of the file and falls to the floor. He bends down to pick it up, and his heart stops when he reads the first line: birth certificate, State of Indiana. Full name, Daniel Marcus Hale. Date of birth, 09/17/1991. Place of birth, County, Memorial Hospital, Indianapolis. Birth mother, Carolyn Hale.
Hale, a strange surname, not Carter. Daniel swallows hard. His eyes stay fixed on the name, Carolyn Hale, as if staring long enough might remind him of something. But no image appears, just an endless void.
He flips through the rest of the papers. It's paperwork from the Department of Child Services, the adoption application, health checks, and finally, the legal adoption approval. The faded ink reads, Adoptive Family Dean and Martha Carter approval, date 10/22/1994, child placed, Daniel Marcus Hale, birth mother, relinquished parental rights, no contact requests. Daniel sits frozen. His hand holds the paper, but he feels nothing but cold. He doesn't know what he should feel: surprised, hurt, or angry. The only thing clear is this: his birth mother's name is Carolyn Hale. He reads the line again: relinquished parental rights. The word relinquished echoes in his head like a hammer blow, but at the same time, it stirs something else, a sense of doubt. Who is Carolyn? Why did she give him up? Why leave no signs behind? And if she truly gave him up, why was this file hidden in the attic rather than discarded? Daniel looks around the room. Everything is still neat, quiet, still holding Martha's breath. But inside him, something begins to stir, like a compass needle first finding its true north. He doesn't know where he's going, but he knows the journey has already begun. Night falls slowly in the empty house. Soft golden light spill from the teardrop-shaped glass lamps Martha had chosen on a rainy afternoon years ago, casting wavering shadows across the ceiling like waves. But inside Daniel, there's no movement but the slow, heavy ache, a feeling that comes when standing at the edge of what you've just learned and what you're terrified to understand further. After a simple dinner of a slice of bread and a cold glass of water, he doesn't turn on the TV. No music, no kitchen lights. He turns off everything, leaving only a bedside lamp on in his bedroom. The room where he grew up, where the purple ink stains he'd scrawled on the wall at age 10 are still there, and the bent hanger his mother used to hang the small suit for Thanksgiving Day. Daniel lies in bed, staring at the ceiling, eyes wide open. The birth certificate and adoption papers still sit on the table by the window. The name Carolyn Hale stands out as if it had just been printed this morning, but it echoes in his mind like a fairy tale name he never believed could be real. He doesn't remember anything about her, no image, no voice, no feeling, but something Strange Lan lingers. The clock strikes 11. The wind howls outside. He pulls the blanket up to his chest, gently closing his eyes, as if he could calm his mind by sinking into sleep. But when sleep comes, it doesn't bring peace, it brings fragments. He finds himself standing in a white room, no windows, no furniture, just white walls, a white ceiling, and cold white tile floors. He's 3 years old, wearing a blue striped shirt, holding a cheap plastic toy boat, the kind you see in orphanages. The room is freezing. He doesn't cry. He just sits on the floor, staring at the door. Suddenly, it opens. A woman steps inside. He can't see her face, just a slender figure. Black hair, white coat. She bends down, her arms wrapping around him tightly.
Lavender, very faint, but clear. A scent he thought was only in the body wash Martha used. But now, it's coming from this woman.
She holds him tight. He hears her heartbeat. A strong, then trembling beat. She whispers something in his ear. But the words are muffled, as if he's hearing them underwater. He strains to listen. He tries to shout, "Who are you?" but his mouth won't open. The room begins to fade. The woman is crying. Tears fall onto his cheek, warm. Her hand trembles as she brushes his hair. Then, someone pulls her away. A scream, a flailing hand. Her tear-filled eyes look back at him. He tries to run after her, but his legs won't move. Her scream still echoes in that empty, white space.
Denny, I'm sorry. I didn't leave you.
Daniel wakes up, drenched in sweat. The blanket is thrown off, his shirt sticking to his back. The clock reads 2:17 a.m. The desk lamp is still on, outside the window. The night is dark. The room feels like it's just been through an earthquake, but everything is still. He touches his face, tears. He doesn't know. Sweat, maybe. But the feeling is undeniable. He just met her, not with his mind, but with his memory. Daniel gets up, opens the window, letting the night wind hit his face. The scent of lavender is still lingering somewhere, even though he knows there's no perfume in this room. But it can't be wrong. He's smelled it before, not today, but 30 years ago.
Mom.
The words escape his lips, from the deepest part of his heart, a soft whisper, but enough to make his heart break in two. The next morning, it rained lightly. The drops tapped rhythmically on the tin roof, like the knock of a past long forgotten. Quietly, tapping at the door, Daniel sat at the dining table, his hands wrapped around a cup of black coffee that had long gone cold. His eyes were fixed on the empty space on the wall where a family portrait used to hang, now taken down, leaving only a faded, square frame. He had stayed awake the entire night after the strange dream, not because he was afraid, but because he couldn't shake the feeling that what he had seen was real. The woman, the hand, the scent of lavender and the heartbreaking call, "Danny, I'm sorry." He needed a reason. He needed something to hold on to, and as if something was urging him. Daniel returned to Martha's room. The room was just as it always had been, the neatly made bed, the books arranged in order, the coat draped over the chair. Nothing had changed in 30 years. He rummaged through the nightstand drawer where Martha kept her pill schedule and reading glasses. Drawer after drawer, paper after paper, even a chewed-up pencil, chewed up. Then, he found a small envelope tucked inside an old leather notebook. No address, no stamp, just a familiar, careful handwriting. "To Danny when you're old enough to ask." His hand froze. He didn't open it immediately. His breath caught in his throat. It took him a few seconds to carefully pull the paper from the envelope. It was a pale yellow sheet, folded in half. The handwriting was thin, slightly slanted. It was Martha's. He read slowly, each word sinking deeper into his chest. My dear, if you're holding this letter, perhaps your parents are no longer here to hug you, and maybe you found the thing that we never had the courage to give you. Yes. Your name is Daniel Marcus Hale. Your birth mother's name is Carolyn. And yes, we chose silence. It wasn't because your birth mother didn't deserve you or because you had no right to know, but when you came into our home, you were too young, too hurt. Every night you dreamed, crying out a name that no one understood. Then you stopped crying, stopped asking. I was afraid that if we spoke of it, you would cry again, just like the day they brought you here. Your father once said, if you're old enough to ask, you're strong enough to hear. So today, if you're reading this, go find your answers, but don't blame us because the only thing we ever tried to do was keep you from hurting again. With all my love, Mum. The letter fell into Daniel's lap like a slow knife wound, not painful at first, but deep, not long, not full of many words, but enough to show that Dean and Martha's silence wasn't rejection, but a different form of love, a love somewhat selfish, but sincere. Daniel sat there for a long time. His eyes never left the words, "Go find your answers." He knew the time had come. It was no longer a choice. It was no longer a passing curiosity. It was time.
Carolyn Hale.
For the first time, he spoke the name of that woman aloud. It echoed through the house like an unfamiliar sound, but one he could no longer deny. And then he stood up. He walked to Dean's office, where the old wooden desk and the dusty laptop sat. He turned on the machine, opened the browser, typed each word carefully. Carolyn Hale, Indianapolis, 1990s. The Indiana Department of Child Services office sat hidden behind the row of government buildings on Market Avenue. The paint was chipped, a dull grayish white, the brick walls peeling. The windows were plastered with signs for volunteer recruitment and a fall fundraising campaign. No one would ever guess this place had once been the starting point for thousands of fates, one of which was Daniel's. He stood before the door, taking a deep breath. In his pocket were copies of his birth certificate and adoption papers, the documents that had just changed the way he saw his entire life. He pushed open the door. A small bell rang, followed by the hum of a printer, the click of a keyboard, and the familiar smell of old paper. The receptionist was a middle-aged woman with her hair pulled up in a bun, wearing wire-rimmed glasses, flipping through an appointment book. She didn't look up when she spoke. Hello, how can I help you?
I'd like to see my adoption file. My name is Daniel Hale. I was adopted here, around 1994.
She stopped writing, looking up. Her voice remained steady and professional. Do you have any ID with you?
Yes, here.
He pulled out his wallet and handed over his driver's license. She looked at it for a moment, then nodded. I'm afraid, according to the rules, adoption files are sealed, even the adoptee, meaning you can't access them without a court order or consent from any living parties involved.
But I just need to confirm the name of my birth mother. I have the information, Carolyn Hale. I'm not searching for my father, not asking for any rights back. I just need to understand. I understand, but I can't help you more than that. I can give you a request form, once submitted. It may take a few weeks for approval.
Daniel exhaled, disappointment evident in his gaze. He took the form, nodded politely, and turned to leave. Just then, a man's voice echoed from down the hallway.
Carolyn Hale, you say...
Daniel turned back, an elderly man in his 70s, wearing a knit cap, and holding a stack of old files, stepped out from the storage room. He squinted, looking at Daniel intently.
Yes, do you know that name?
I'm Jerry. I used to work here as a clerk, retired now, but I still help out a couple of days a week. That name Carolyn Hale sounds very familiar. If I'm not mistaken, she was involved in a highly contested case around 93 or 94.
Daniel tightened his grip on the papers in his hand.
Do you know who handled that case?
I do. A young woman back then, she worked in the emergency intervention department. Her name was Amelia. Amelia Torres. She's probably retired by now. She was the one who cried the most after each case of separating mother and child. Soft-hearted, but principled. If anyone remembers anything, it would be her.
Daniel nodded, as if grasping the first thread in a tangled web.
Thank you. Do you know where she is now?
Not sure, but I remember last year someone sent her a Christmas card to me to forward. It was from an address in Bloomington. I can't promise anything, but you should start there.
Daniel gripped the paper tightly, giving a small nod. No words of thanks, just a look. Then, he turned and quickly left the office, carrying with him a new name, Amelia Torres. Bloomington was a small, quiet town, as if every sound had been filtered through a veil. The road leading to the address Jerry mentioned curved through a few rows of maple trees, their fiery red leaves scattered across the sidewalk like a fall silk carpet. House number 37 stood modestly between two white brick mansions. Grey walls, a small porch with a hanging basket of dried orchids. Daniel stepped out of the car, standing for a few seconds in front of the black iron gate, his chest tightening with each gust of cold wind slipping through his collar. He didn't know what to expect, a confirmation, a small detail to make everything clear, or just someone, for the first time, telling him you weren't abandoned. The wooden door opened just as he was about to press the doorbell. A woman in her 60s, silver hair, no makeup, wearing a thick sweater and capri pants, looked at him through round glasses.
You are.
Sorry for coming so suddenly. My name is Daniel Hale. I was told you used to work at the Department of Child Services, back in the early 90s.
Amelia paused for a second, her eyes blinking behind her glasses.
I retired nearly 10 years ago. Not many people looking for adopted children come here anymore. Hale, you said?
Carolyn Hale, my birth mother.
She stepped back. A name that seemed to have been asleep for 3 decades now stirred, rising like a cry from the heart. Daniel saw her hand grip the doorframe tightly.
Come in.
Inside the small house was a world of quiet. Bookshelves lined the walls, many black and white photographs in frames, and a teapot simmering on the stove. She poured 2 cups of tea, handed one to him, and then sat down at the kitchen table across from him.
I remember Carolyn. I can't forget her. She was one of the cases. That haunted me the longest.
Daniel sat still, not interrupting. He just watched her, his gaze urging her to continue.
In 1993, I worked in the emergency department handling cases of homelessness, abuse, or high risk. Carolyn was 23 at the time, brought you into the hospital with a handwritten letter asking for help. No father listed, no stable job, living in a weekly rent boarding house. But she never let you go hungry, always showed up for checkups. No smoking, no drugs, just too poor and too alone.
So why?
Because she didn't meet the requirements for parenting. Back then, the state was tightening regulations. You needed a stable address, financial backing, and family supervision. She had nothing but love and 2 empty hands. They reviewed it, then made the decision for a temporary separation. I remember the day the order came through, she screamed in the hearing room, said she'd do anything, clean trash, scrub floors, anything to stay with her child. She didn't abandon you. She was taken from you.
Daniel set his cup of tea down. His heart tightened, not from anger, but from compassion. A feeling he had never allowed himself to consider his mother fought for him. She hadn't given up.
Do you remember anything else? Did she ever say anything about the name Daniel?
That was the name she chose when the hospital suggested a temporary name for the baby. She wrote on the form, "My son's name is Daniel Marcus. Marcus is my grandfather's name. He was the last good man I knew."
Daniel turned away, wiping his nose lightly. The air felt still.
After the court's decision, I was no longer allowed to contact her, but I still remember Carolyn's eyes that day. There was no hatred. Just one thing: she hoped someone, anyone, would believe she was a worthy mother.
Daniel stood up, bowing his head in thanks. He didn't cry, but there was something in his eyes that had broken. As he reached the door, Amelia called after him.
You know, I used to think if Daniel Marcus grew up and came back, maybe he'd forgive an entire system that pushed that mother aside. Thank you for coming. You've given me an answer I never dared to hope for 30 years.
James Bell's third-floor apartment sat in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of Indianapolis, a place where the elderly live quietly. No one asks too many questions, and nothing changes throughout the year. Daniel arrived in the afternoon, carrying with him a copy of the court order he had obtained from the state legal office, and a feeling deep in his chest, like someone was softly tapping at his sternum with an unanswered question. He rang the doorbell, 2 chimes, the sound of a lock turning from inside. Then the door cracked open. The man was in his 80s, tall and thin, with sparse white hair, wearing thin-rimmed glasses and a thick wool sweater. His gaze lingered on Daniel's face.
"You're Daniel Hale. Right, Amelia called this morning. Said someone would be coming to see me about Carolyn."
Yes, that's me.
He said nothing more. He simply stepped aside, silently inviting Daniel in. The apartment was neat, filled with old books and a few framed landscape paintings of the Midwest. A record player in the corner was still spinning a vinyl record, the soft sounds of Louis Armstrong blending with the musty scent of wood and black tea in the air. James gestured to a chair for Daniel, then poured the tea himself. His hand shook slightly as he placed the cup on the table.
"I thought I might never meet you, but I knew, if anyone came looking, it would be that little boy, Daniel Marcus Hale."
Daniel nodded slightly. He pulled a folder from his backpack, nothing much. Just a few pages, the document terminating Carolyn Hale's parental rights, signed in 1994.
I found this, but these words, they don't say anything. They just list no stable home, no income, no sponsorship. I need to know what the truth is. From you, the one who stood on the other side of that hearing.
James leaned back, sitting in silence for a few seconds, then nodded slowly.
"Carolyn Hale was a special case. I remember that one. Kept me up for several nights. Back then, I was the state's attorney. My job was to protect the child's best interests according to the law, and according to the law at that time, Carolyn didn't meet the standards to be a mother."
But she loved her child. She didn't abandon me.
"No, she didn't abandon you. I could see that clearly. Carolyn was a young mother, living in a weekly rental, working 2 housekeeping jobs at different hotels. No family, no health insurance, no sponsor. But every time she came to the clinic for her prenatal checkups, she was on time. No addiction, no missed appointments. She never let her baby go hungry. She just didn't qualify."
He sighed, placing a hand on his forehead.
"I remember the day of the hearing. Carolyn arrived late because the bus was delayed. She came in wearing an old dress, hands trembling. But when the court made the ruling to terminate her rights, she didn't shout. She just cried. She said, 'Please let me keep my child. I'll do any job. I don't need welfare. I just need my son to know I didn't abandon him.'"
Daniel looked down at the paper in his hand, the dry words that had never captured what James had just told him. His throat tightened.
Then why didn't you oppose it?
"Because I did my job. Because the law doesn't have a place for love. The law only has standards, and Carolyn had no one on her side, no lawyer, no family, no witnesses. I had no choice but to follow the law and still let her go.
Daniel stood up, slowly walking to the window, outside. The wind had picked up. An elderly couple was walking beneath the maple trees, their leaves falling around them.
I used to think my mother had given up, but she fought, alone.
Yes, and I haven't forgotten that.
James opened a drawer and pulled out an old envelope.
This is the final transcript from Carolyn, written down by the court clerk. Not an official document, but I kept it to remind myself that some things are bigger than the law.
Daniel took the envelope. His hands shook slightly.
I'm going to find her, not to take anything back, but to tell her that I've never blamed her. And now, I never doubted her.
James nodded. They shook hands, not as two men, but as a reconciliation between truth and regret.
If you do find Carolyn, tell her that there was one person who stood on the wrong side but never stopped regretting it.
Daniel left the apartment with something heavy in his hand and a light feeling in his heart. The evening wind blew strongly against his jacket, as if someone far away was sighing softly. The Marion County Court Records Office was on the third floor of an old red brick building covered in moss, as silent as the function it served to keep things no one wanted to remember anymore. Daniel arrived early in the morning, carrying the form he had signed the day before. Following James Bell's advice, you should read it with your own eyes, not for the law, but for the justice in your heart. The person who greeted him was a woman with brown hair tied back, wearing a name tag that read Rebecca, Historical Records. She smiled gently, politely and formally, leading Daniel to a row of weathered filing cabinets, pointing to the section Family Court, 1994.
Here, file code 48CH9427. You can search by name or by the case number.
Daniel searched through the files. The folder was thin, only 6 pages, bound together with a stiff cover. He brought it to a reading desk by the window, where the faint light of a fall morning filtered through the cloudy glass. Court Order, Indiana Family Court, October 17, 1994. Case Carolyn M. Hale versus Department of Child Services. Decision termination of parental rights for Daniel Marcus. Hale basis, no fixed residence, no personal guarantor, no stable income to support a minor, insufficient financial social means for legal protection. The language was dry. Each line seemed crafted with words devoid of heart. Daniel flipped to the last page, where the signatures and official seal were, but a small note at the bottom made his eyes stop. Birth mother currently residing temporarily at Maple Hollow Lodge, Franklin Street, Kent, Ohio, recorded through guardianship request 7/1894. Daniel read it again, then 3 times. The address, a landmark, a concrete clue, the first one about where his mother had lived after leaving Indianapolis. He pulled out his phone and quickly searched the map. Kent was about a 4-hour drive away, not big, not famous, but now it was the only place to start. Daniel folded the file, returning it to the counter.
I don't need a copy. I've got what I need most.
Good. If you need anything else, just come back. Everything's here, even if no one remembers.
Daniel nodded, stepping out of the building, his heart heavy, but his footsteps lighter. In his hand, there was nothing except for a small address in his pocket, beating slowly like the soft knock of a door from the past calling him home. Kent, Ohio, was a small, quiet town where everything seemed to have stood still over the years. Daniel had passed through many towns like this during his search for his mother. But today, as he stepped into this town, he felt like he was standing at the threshold of a past he had never lived, yet one that still lingered in the memories of a mother who never gave up. He drove through narrow streets, the smell of wood and fallen leaves carried by the autumn wind along the way. There was nothing remarkable except the red brick houses and a few quiet shops. when he reached the first intersection. He stopped the car and looked at a faded wooden sign, Maple Hollow Lodge. This was the place Carolyn, his mother, had once lived. This address wasn't something Daniel found on birthday cards or letters from his mother. It appeared in a small note in a social services file that Daniel had gathered from his meeting with James Bell. This old address had never been officially recorded anywhere, yet it held an important part of his mother's story. He turned off the car, took a deep breath, and stepped out. The cold air of late autumn pierced his skin, but his hands didn't shake. This was the first step in unraveling what had been hidden. He climbed the old wooden stairs and stopped in front of room 2 where the wood was worn and the paint chipped. He knocked on the door. A moment later, the door opened. An elderly man appeared, squinting as if trying to figure out who was knocking on the door in this quiet town.
What do you need?
I'm looking for information about a woman named Carolyn Hale. She lived here in the mid-90s.
The man looked at him for a long moment, then seemed to recognize something. He stopped talking and furrowed his brow. That's when Daniel realized the man wasn't entirely unfamiliar with the name.
Carolyn. She lived in room 6 upstairs, a few years ago. She didn't talk much, but she would send letters with no return address. I remember her mentioning a son named Danny. That must be you, right?
Yes, I'm Danny.
The man's eyes lit up, and he stepped back, allowing Daniel to enter. The door opened wider, revealing a small old room with furniture that hadn't changed in years. A strange feeling enveloped him, as though time had stopped here long ago. The man led Daniel to a corner of the room where there was an old cabinet. He opened it, taking out a small wooden box. The lid had faded, writing, "For Danny, if you ever come back to find your mother," or... Daniel froze. It felt as if he had just found a part of his past that he never knew. The box. His mother had left it for him, though she had never had the chance to give it to her child. He took the box from the man's hands, feeling an unusual heaviness inside it. His mother had hidden the memories that had never been given, the words of love that had never been spoken. He opened the box. Inside were birthday cards, a few handwritten letters, and some faded photographs. Everything was neatly packed in a worn plastic bag. Daniel didn't rush. He gently flipped through each item, as though afraid that if he wasn't careful, he might break a part of the memory. The birthday cards, the handwritten letters, these were messages that had never been sent. They were parts of his mother he had never had the chance to receive. And now, in this box, he found the love, the sacrifice, and a love he had never fully understood. Daniel slowly took each item out of the small wooden box, his hands gentle, as though he were holding sacred memories. The box wasn't just a container of memories, it was a bridge between him and his mother, a bridge that had been broken for so many years. He looked down at the first birthday card. The first card had a picture of a toy car, with a note from his mother inside. "Danny, 5 years old. What do you like today? I remember your eyes shining like a calm autumn lake. I will always be the first to wish you happy birthday. I hope you stay as happy as you are today. I love you so much. Carolyn." Reading these words, a lump formed in Daniel's throat. He had never received such words of love from his mother when he was young. He had once thought that his mother didn't love him, or that she had abandoned him. But now, reading these lines, he understood that his mother had never abandoned him. She just never had the chance to keep him by her side. Her love was unconditional, even if she couldn't fulfill those promises. He turned to the next card. It was for his 6th birthday. The front had an image of a small rabbit running across a field of purple flowers. Inside the card were these words, "Happy 6th birthday, Danny, what do you like today? I remember the times when you would hug me to sleep. You might not remember, but I still do. I love you so much. These words made him choke up even more. How could his mother love him so much, but not be able to be by his side? How could she live through those years without once being able to hug him? Without once sharing those precious moments of childhood? He read these words again. And for the first time, he felt that the emptiness he had felt was not because his mother didn't love him, but because of a mother's helplessness in an unjust world. He continued flipping through the other cards, each one a message of love, a feeling that was never sent. These were things his mother couldn't give him when he was a child, and now each card was a part of a past he had never lived through, yet it was an essential memory in his life. One card made him pause. It was from his 8th birthday. The card had a picture of a small cake, and the note inside read, "Happy 8th birthday. My dear son, you've grown so much. I still remember the first time I held you, feeling your heartbeat. I can't say everything I want to, but in my heart, you are still the most innocent little boy. I love you more than anything." Reading these words, Daniel felt a strange pain in his heart. His mother had been there, watching over him, loving him with all her heart, but couldn't give him these words during his early years, the years when he had missed out on love, missed his mother's presence, but not the love she had given him. He gently folded the card and looked around the old room. Each item in this box was a part of his mother, each message, a part of the love she had poured into the cards that had never reached him. Those words of love had been hidden, like a gift that was never opened. Suddenly, an idea flashed in Daniel's mind. His mother had written these words not because she hoped to see him again, but because she hoped he would understand that she had never abandoned him. It was a love that couldn't be measured by time or space, but a love that was eternal. Daniel placed the box back on the table, looking at the neatly stacked cards. Though these words had never been given to him in person, they had brought him a healing he never expected. His mother's love had been here, in the words of those messages, in every card he had read. He sat for a moment, letting everything settle. In the quiet space of the room, he felt a new connection with his mother, not through blame, but through all that had never been said. And in that small box, he found comfort, a release he never knew he needed. Daniel sat alone in the small room, his mother's box still open in front of him on the table. The air around him seemed to freeze, with only the sound of his breath and the faint rustling of leaves outside the window. Each birthday card, each letter, each faded photograph stirred a feeling in his heart, a bittersweet blend of sweetness and pain. He had never known that his mother's love for him was so strong through the words that were never spoken, through the love that was never given. He turned the next card over, his 9th birthday card. The front of the card showed a simple image of a birthday cake, with the words inside, "Happy 9th birthday, Danny. You've grown so much. I still remember the first time I held you, feeling your heartbeat. I can't be with you, but I think of you every day. You are the only joy in my life. I love you so much." Reading these words, he could feel his chest tighten. His mother's words weren't just birthday wishes, they were the heartache of a mother who couldn't care for her child. She loved him in a way that nothing could replace. Nothing could replace the love of a mother for her child. He continued flipping through the cards, reading the words over and over. Each one carried hopes and longings that his mother had sent to him from his childhood. She had loved him, but had to live in a world that didn't allow her to raise him. Then he reached the 10th birthday card. This one wasn't just a card, it was a long handwritten letter. The ink faded, but the words still soaked with love. "Happy 10th birthday, my dear son. You've really grown. I still remember the first time I held you, feeling your heartbeat. I can't say everything I want, but in my heart, you are still the most innocent little boy. I love you more than anything." These words made Daniel's heart ache. His mother had loved him from the moment he was born, loved him even when she couldn't be by his side. These words felt like a distant greeting, a promise she couldn't keep. He paused, his hand clutching the cards. The sense of loss and love mingled together, as though memories that had been hidden now exploded. These cards, these letters, they were parts of his life that had never been lived. His mother's love for him had always existed, despite the distance, despite the time. But now, all of this made him feel the deep love his mother had for him, even if it was too late. Suddenly, the feeling overwhelmed him, a mix of sympathy and regret. His mother had endured helplessness for so many years. She couldn't give him what a mother should have, someone who could be there for her child, care for her child, but at least, through these cards, he could see the love he never received, but now had become part of him. Tears ran down Daniel's cheeks, not out of anger, but because he realized that this love had never left him. His mother had never abandoned him. She loved him unconditionally, no matter the distance, no matter the time apart, no matter how many times she couldn't be with him. Her love was eternal. He placed the box down on the table, his eyes still on the cards and letters from his mother. His heart felt lighter, as though a heavy burden had been lifted. He understood that love doesn't need to be exchanged, doesn't need to be physically present. It exists in the heart. His mother had always been there in every word, every card, every letter that was never sent. In that moment, Daniel felt that he no longer lacked his mother. He understood that. Despite the space or time that separated them, his mother's love would always live on in his heart. Daniel stood up, feeling a relief he had never known before. He stepped outside, leaving the box with his mother's memories in the old room. But in his heart, those cards, those messages from his mother would always stay with him forever. When Daniel arrived in Milwaukee, it felt as though he was walking down a road he never knew he would travel. Although he had arrived early in the morning, the city's gloom weighed on him, not because of the tall buildings, but because of the emptiness he felt inside. His journey to the nursing home wasn't something he had planned from the start. It was the result of the puzzle pieces he had found through James Bell's words and his former landlord's recollections. These final clues led him to a place where he didn't know what he would find, but his heart led the way. No longer filled with doubt. The nursing home was located on the outskirts of Milwaukee, in an old historic neighborhood. The old houses were surrounded by tall trees with thick foliage. Sunrise Meadows Nursing Home was housed in a 3-story white building with large windows overlooking the garden behind. This place wasn't like the nursing homes Daniel had imagined. It wasn't cold or gloomy, but rather a place full of quiet serenity and peace. He walked down the hallway of the nursing home, looking around. The image of elderly patients sitting on chairs, reading books, or gazing out of windows stirred a vague sadness in him. They, like his mother, were people who had lived parts of their lives but never given the perfect opportunity to live fully. One of the nurses, a middle-aged woman with long brown hair, approached Daniel as he stood by the reception desk.
Hello, how can I help you?
I'm looking for information about a former resident here, a woman named Carolyn Hale. She worked here for a while. I think she lived here before she left.
The nurse stopped, looking at Daniel for a moment, her eyes full of curiosity, but also a hint of sympathy.
Ah, Carolyn. She was a housekeeper here, worked for quite a while, but she left about a few months ago. She always carried a faded knit scarf and an old photograph of her son. Every time I met her, she talked a lot about that son, Looking at her, I could see the love that never faded in her eyes.
The nurse's words struck Daniel deeply. Those words felt like another confirmation of the love his mother had for him. A faded knit scarf, an old photograph, two simple items. But they held a treasure trove of memories his mother had carried with her all these years.
Did she leave any information about where she went, or any clues about where she might have gone?
The nurse lowered her head, as if trying to recall. Then she looked at Daniel with a compassionate gaze.
Actually, I don't know where she went, but she did say that if her son ever came looking for her, she'd leave a message, if you'd like. I can take you to her room. I remember she left some belongings in her locker.
It felt like a big door opened before Daniel. He thanked the nurse and followed her down the hallway to a room at the end. The door was old wood, worn down with time. But inside, it was a clean and tidy room. There was a single bed, a small table with a few books, and on the table, a faded knit scarf, neatly folded, as if his mother had always carried it with her. Daniel stood still in front of the scarf, feeling as though he had just touched a very private part of his mother. He couldn't help but feel a new connection, a connection to the love he had never fully understood. His mother had carried this scarf as a keepsake, to remember him by. Something that had always been with her during the years she lived away from him. He continued to search around the room, and in a small drawer, he found a faded photograph. The picture was blurry, but he could recognize his own face. It was him as a little boy. About 3 years old, his heart skipped a beat. This was the photograph his mother had kept with her all these years. The old photo, where a young child smiled brightly under the sun. He sighed, feeling like he had found an important piece of the puzzle on this journey. His mother had always carried simple items, but they were full of meaning. The faded knit scarf and the photo of him, these were the tokens of a love that never ran dry. He looked back at the nurse, his eyes full of gratitude.
Thank you so much. These things mean more than 1,000 words.
The nurse smiled gently, her eyes soft.
I just did what I could, and I hope you find what you're looking for. Carolyn really missed her son.
Daniel nodded, and with the faded scarf in his hand, he left the room. His journey was nearly at its end, but his heart felt full with emotions he had been searching for all along. After leaving the nursing home and discovering important clues about his mother, Daniel felt like he was standing at a crossroads, the photo of him as a child that his mother had kept all these years. The faded knit scarf she always carried, these felt like the final pieces that helped him piece together his mother's life, a life full of love, but also full of regrets. But his journey wasn't over. All he knew about his mother were fragments, incomplete memories. He knew Carolyn had left the nursing home, but he didn't know where she had gone or how she lived. To find her, Daniel needed more information from the people who had been close to her, from the places she had lived and worked. So, he decided to visit the records office of the nursing home, where all the information about the patients and staff was kept. It was the place that could help him find the final clue. He walked into the small building, the dim hallway lights flickering, and the atmosphere was a bit gloomy. A middle-aged woman, likely a records clerk, looked up as Daniel entered. She was open but had a hint of caution.
Hello, how can I help you?
Hi. I'm looking for information about a woman named Carolyn Hale. She worked here for quite a while, and I think if you can, you might be able to tell me something about her.
The records clerk paused for a moment, her eyes scanning Daniel's face. It seemed like she was trying to recall something about this woman.
Carolyn. I remember her. She was a long-time housekeeper here, but she left a few months ago. Let me check the records and see if there's anything I can provide you.
The records clerk flipped through a few pages in the file. Searching for information, Daniel stood still, both anxious and hopeful. Every passing moment felt like a decisive one, a step closer to the truth about his mother.
Finally, she stopped and looked at him.
I found some information about her in the records. Carolyn Hale worked here for many years before she resigned. But there's one thing I remember clearly. She always carried a faded knit scarf and an old photo of her son. Every time I saw her, she would talk about that son. But after she left, we never heard from her again.
The words of the records clerk hit Daniel like a blow to the heart. The feeling was strange, a mix of pain and warmth, because he had found one last trace of his mother, the faded knit scarf. The old photograph, these were the things Carolyn had carried with her during her years working at the nursing home. The things she treasured and kept close.
Do you know where she went? Is there any way I can find out where she lived after leaving the nursing home?
The records clerk thought for a moment, then shook her head.
Honestly, I don't know where she went, but if you'd like, I can give you a copy of her file. Maybe there's something in it that you need.
Daniel nodded. This was his last chance to find out where his mother had gone, to get information about her after leaving the nursing home. He knew that, even if it was a small detail, each piece was crucial. The records clerk immediately walked into a small room behind the desk, where old files were stored. A few moments later, she returned with a copy of Carolyn Hale's file. She handed it to Daniel, along with a gentle smile.
Here's a copy of her file. I hope it helps you find your mother.
Daniel took the file, thanked the records clerk, and left the building. As he stepped outside, holding the important papers in his hands, a wave of emotion washed over him. His mother was still out there, and now he had the chance to find her. He felt as though he was on the brink of achieving what he wanted to find his mother. Hear the words she had never spoken, and understand that her love for him had never truly left. After leaving the nursing home and uncovering important details about his mother, Daniel felt like a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. But his journey was far from over. The items his mother had left behind, the faded knit scarf and the old photograph, were the final pieces he needed to feel her love. Yet, he knew that something had to be done to close this emotional journey, not with anger or regret, but with understanding and forgiveness. He had written a letter, not just a message, but everything he wanted his mother to know. He knew that, though he couldn't meet her right away, this letter might bring them closer, even if only through words that had never been spoken. Daniel went to the park where the old red mailbox stood. This was where he had decided to leave his message, where he believed the words would reach their destination. The surroundings were peaceful, with golden leaves drifting to the ground and birds singing in the distance. The atmosphere was quiet, as if the entire space was waiting for something significant to happen. He stood before the mailbox, clutching the letter he had written. The tightness in his chest remained, but there was also a sense of calm. He looked at the letter one last time, then slowly placed it into the mailbox. What he felt wasn't an ending, but the opening of a new opportunity for him and his mother to reconnect the emotional thread that had been severed for so long. As he turned to leave, a soft voice from behind called to him,
Denny!
Daniel turned around, and in that moment, time seemed to stop. Before him stood a woman in the light drizzle, her eyes brimming with tears, although her face had been marked by time. There was something so familiar in her gaze, her gestures, that made his heart tighten. He stood there for a long moment, saying nothing, just looking at her. A wave of emotion surged within him. The woman he had searched for all this time was standing right in front of him, his mother. Carolyn stepped forward, her movements slow and hesitant. She seemed almost unable to believe what she was seeing. She looked up at Daniel, her trembling hands clutching the faded knit scarf she always carried. An indescribable emotion filled her eyes, a mix of doubt and then realization.
Is it you?
Daniel stood still for a moment, unsure of what to say. His eyes spoke for him, his hands open in response, like a silent answer to her question. He didn't know what to say, but his gaze conveyed everything. She looked at him, and slowly, her eyes brightened as though she understood. Not through words, but through his presence. His mother stood before him, still clutching the scarf, her eyes filled with tears, but this time they were tears of happiness. She took a step closer to him, yet hesitated as though afraid that if she moved too fast, it would all vanish. Daniel opened his arms. Finally, she stepped into his embrace, as if she had been waiting for this moment for years. All the emptiness, all the pain, seemed to melt away in her arms. They stood there in the rain, without words, just love and long-held memories.
Mom, I've found you.
I never dared to hope.
In that moment, everything became clear. The rain, the faded scarf, the old photograph, these were all witnesses to the boundless love of a mother who had sacrificed and waited. Daniel didn't need to ask anything more. His mother's love was the answer to all the years they had spent apart. They stood there, embracing in the rain, as all the tears mixed with the falling drops, like a long-awaited greeting, but filled with love. Mother and son sat facing each other in the small living room. In an unfamiliar silence, the room was simple, with old fabric-covered chairs, a wooden table, and a warm yellow lamp. They said nothing, just sat quietly, as if trying to process the emotions that had never been expressed. Carolyn looked at Daniel as if seeing a dream, something too beautiful, too miraculous to be believed, although deep down, she had longed for this moment for years. Now that it had finally arrived, part of her couldn't quite believe it. That feeling kept Carolyn from speaking immediately, as if words could shatter this sacred moment.
I didn't dare to hope, but I wrote every year.
Daniel sat still, those words carving into his heart like gentle knives. He understood his mother had always hoped, even knowing that hope might just be a dream that could never come true. But every year, she wrote, she still recorded her love, her feelings that she couldn't express. He said nothing, just lowered his head. These moments didn't need to rush. His mother's eyes had already spoken everything she had kept hidden for so long.
After a long while, Carolyn spoke again, her voice soft, as if not wanting to break the peace that surrounded them.
Do you know, all these years, I couldn't be with you. I worked cleaning in so many places, constantly moving. I had to live in small, cramped rooms, saving every penny. But every time I moved, I would look out the window, seeing you being taken to a new home, seeing you being loved. But I couldn't touch your life. I didn't dare. Danny.
Daniel stayed silent, a deep sense of sorrow rising in his chest. He had never known those years were full of hardship for his mother. She had fought against life, but quietly watched from afar, loving him without being able to be there. That feeling shattered his heart.
I could only watch you from afar and hope that you'd be happy, even though I couldn't be the one standing by your side.
These words hit Daniel's heart like a crashing wave. She hadn't just been absent, she had lived with an indescribable pain. His mother's love wasn't just the absence, it was the sacrifice, the agony that words couldn't express. Daniel looked at his mother, his eyes filled with tears, not out of anger, but out of compassion. He had understood everything. His mother had lived with unspeakable pain all these years, and now he understood that she had never abandoned him. She had only been stripped of her rights as a mother by a system she couldn't fight. He couldn't hold back his emotions anymore. Tears fell, but not out of anger or blame, but because the pain had been healed. They had lived half a lifetime with hearts half empty, but now everything had changed.
You never abandoned me. They took you away from my life. But I think I still remember the scent of lavender.
Carolyn cried, not because she felt guilty anymore, but because she had been forgiven. Daniel's words, simple yet profound, had touched her heart. Her son, after all these years, finally understood her, and that forgiveness was the greatest gift she could receive. They embraced, not saying anything more. Carolyn's hands held him tightly, as if she never wanted to let go, never wanting to miss a single moment. Mother and son walked along the path in the park, saying nothing, just the presence of one another. For the first time in many years, Daniel held his mother's hand, feeling the warmth he had never known. They sat down on a bench, gazing at the distant lake. A red kite flew up into the sky, drifting in the wind. Carolyn looked at the kite, her eyes reflecting an indescribable emotion.
I've always watched you. It's just that you never looked back.
Daniel turned to his mother, looking deeply into her eyes, as though he wanted to uncover everything she hadn't said. Part of him wanted to ask about the years they had spent apart, about the pain she had endured, but in this moment, he needed to say just one thing.
I'm sorry I didn't find you sooner, but now, I'll always be by your side, never leaving again.
His mother looked at him, her hands clenched tightly, and for the first time in her life, she felt that she was no longer alone. They would start over. Though it was late, it was never too late. They sat there, watching the red kite soar high in the sky, their hearts full of hope and the connection they had found again. No words were needed, just love that was all they needed. Thank you for listening to the story. If you have any thoughts, feel free to share them in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Once again, I'm really happy to have you here. Don't forget to subscribe so we can keep sharing more stories about life together. Take care and see you next time.